with the rustle of autumn leaves and the scent of a roasting turkey in the air, a father's world shattered with a single overheard sentence. This is the story of a betrayal so deep, it came from my own blood and the silent, meticulous war one waged to reclaim my life, my freedom, and my future. The lessons learned in the quiet aftermath were not about vengeance, but about the unshakable architecture of self-respect, the cold calculus of survival, and the profound loneliness of a victory that feels like a different kind of loss. 10 days before Thanksgiving, the Arizona sun was a relentless, pale eye in a washed-out sky, bleaching the color from the sprawling Sonoran landscape surrounding my home. I'd returned home nearly 2 hours, early from a routine checkup with my cardiologist, Dr. Avens, a man with a kind face and a penchant for telling long, winding stories. The appointment had been blessedly brief. My heart, both the physical, muscle, and the emotional core deemed stubbornly robust for a man of 71. The EKG lines had marched across the screen in strong, predictable patterns, and my blood pressure was, in his words, better than a marathon runner's. He clapped me on the shoulder, told me to keep doing whatever I was doing, and sent me on my way with a clean bill of health. The unexpected gift of time felt like a small, personal blessing. I decided I would stop at the old bakery on Central and pick up the apricot Danish Eleanor had loved, a private little ritual to mark another year of carrying on without her. I pulled my decade-old sedan, a perfectly maintained Volvo that refused to die, into the familiar, curved driveway of the single-story ranch home I'd designed and built with my own hands over 40 years prior. The gravel crunched familiarly under the tires, a sound that for decades had signaled peace, homecoming, the end of a long day at the drafting table or a construction site. That day, for reasons I could not yet articulate, it felt like the first ominous note of a dirge. Cutting the engine, I sat for a long moment, massaging my left knee, the arthritis a persistent, aching souvenir from a long-ago misstep on a rain-slicked steel girder. The desert heat was a physical presence, pushing 90 degrees even in late November, leaching the vibrant magenta from the sprawling bougainvillea that Eleanor, my late wife, had so lovingly nurtured from cuttings. It was too quiet. No faint thrum of music from Sophia's old room, now a guest room home office, no blaring sports commentary from Leo's television in the den. Just the low, constant hum of the central air, conditioning fighting a losing battle against the oppressive desert afternoon. A prickle of unease, a mere intuition honed by decades of assessing unstable ground and spotting hairline, fractures in seemingly solid foundations, made me forgo the grand front entrance with its heavy, hand-carved oak door Eleanor had found on a trip to Santa Fe. Instead, I slipped in through the side garage entrance, my shoes coming off by silent habit on the laundry room's cool saltillo tile, a rule Sophia had insisted upon years ago to protect her pristine, sand-colored hardwood floors from desert grit. The house smelled of lemony polish and the faint, floral trace of her perfume. It was the smell of order, of her order. The voices hit me the moment I crossed the threshold from the laundry room into the main hallway. They weren't loud, didn't carry the heat of an argument, but they traveled with a peculiar, resonant clarity down the staircase from my upstairs study, a sanctum I'd retreated to for decades to work on blueprints, to solve engineering puzzles, and, more recently, to simply sit in the worn leather chair and be with my memories of Eleanor. It was Sophia's laugh I registered first. Not her genuine, uninhibited giggle from childhood that could light up a room, but a newer, sharper, more metallic sound, a crisp, calculated punctuation mark of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was followed by the low, conspiratorial rumble of her husband, Leo, a sound usually reserved for murmuring platitudes to me about the stock market or the landscaping. Every nerve in my body, every primal instinct that had once screamed a warning when a beam was undersized or a foundation was settling on soft clay, now screamed a silent internal alarm. I didn't call out a greeting. I didn't move to pour myself a glass of water. I became a statue in the shadowed hallway, my hand finding the cool, solid familiarity of the staircase banister I'd turned and sanded from a single, magnificent piece of maple, my fingers tracing the grooves of the grain I knew by heart. I held my breath, the air in my lungs suddenly stale. The final version is drafted, and Dr. Aldridge signed the supplemental affidavit this morning. Sophia's voice floated down, crisp, professional, devoid of any familial warmth. It was the voice she used for important phone calls, for dealing with contractors. The language is perfect. Profound cognitive deterioration marked by paranoia, financial irresponsibility, and a growing inability to perform basic activities of daily living. It paints the exact clinical picture we need. It's not emotional. It's factual, which is what the court responds to. A coldness so profound and sudden it felt like liquid nitrogen had been injected into my veins, began to spread from my core, frosting my ribs, chilling my stomach. Dr. Aldridge? I knew no Dr. Aldridge. My doctors were Evans. For my heart and Peterson. For my arthritis. Cognitive deterioration? I still did the Sunday New York Times crossword in pen, a ritual Eleanor and I had shared for 50 years. Paranoia? Financial irresponsibility? The words were alien, grotesque labels that bore no relation to the man I was, the life I led. Leo's response was a greedy, eager murmur I had to strain to hear, my good ear tilted toward the sound. And the property transfer package is fully synced with the court filing dates. My guy in the title office has it queued. The minute the probate judge grants the temporary guardianship, which, with this affidavit, should be a slam dunk, we electronically execute the transfer into your name as conservator. Simultaneously, we petition for immediate sale due to the exigent and pressing need to fund his intensive round-the-clock care. The market analysis from the appraiser supports a list price of $750. After fees, commissions, and paying off the small remaining mortgage, we net enough to zero out my business line of credit, the second mortgage on the condo we lost, and have a substantial nest egg left. A clean slate. A fresh start, soft for real this time. My house, our house. The one where Eleanor's laughter used to echo in the vaulted living room we'd designed for Christmas, trees and piano recitals. The one with Sophia's tiny 5-year-old handprints pressed into the wet concrete of the back patio, next to our own. The old mesquite tree we'd planted in the ceremony when she was born, now towering and gnarled. The kitchen where we'd burned 1,000 pancakes and celebrated 1,000 small victories. It was all reduced, in that moment, to a number on a spreadsheet. $750,000, a means to erase Leo's cascading, failed entrepreneurial debts, the reckless gambles I'd reluctantly bailed him out of twice before. The floor beneath my feet seemed to tilt, the familiar hallway warping. I pressed my palm harder into the wood grain of the banister, the unyielding solidity of the maple an anchor against a rising, dizzying tide of vertigo and disbelief. The best part is his utter, complete cluelessness, Sophia continued, and now her tone held a contempt so vile, so intimate, it made my stomach clench and the bile rise in my throat. He still asks me to check his checkbook, register for errors. He thanks me with this pathetic gratitude for managing things. He's a trusting, sentimental old fool, stuck in a world where family means something. 2 more weeks. Just 2 more weeks of playing the devoted, patient daughter, of smiling through this pathetic Thanksgiving charade he's so excited to host. And it's done. The paperwork is filed, the judge signs, and we're free. No more babysitting. No more humoring his senile ramblings about Mom or his great projects. No. More living in this time capsule. Senile ramblings. The words were physical blows, each one landing with a sickening thud in the center of my being. Our long conversations about Roman aqueducts and their engineering marvels, my stories of her mother's fierce intelligence and kindness, my reflections on a lifetime of building things meant to last, all of it. In her mind reduced to senile, ramblings to be humored. The betrayal in that moment ceased to be a single, sharp knife thrust. It became the slow, agonizing, bone-deep realization that every cup of tea she'd brought me while I read, every furrowed brow expression of concern about my forgetfulness when I misplaced my keys, every time she'd gently but firmly taken a bill or a financial statement from my hand saying, "Let me handle this, Dad," You shouldn't stress had not been acts of daughterly kindness. They had been strategic moves on a chessboard I didn't know I was playing on. They had been the careful, patient, calculated laying of groundwork for this exact monstrous moment. The 2 years they had lived with me, rent-free after Leo's first major business venture, collapsed and they'd lost their conduit, wasn't the lifeline I'd believed I was, throwing my struggling only child. It had been a Trojan horse, a vehicle for invasion, and I, the fool, had welcomed it past my walls with open arms, festooning it with my own naive, unconditional love. A raw, animal part of me, the part that was simply a father, wounded to his soul, wanted to storm up the stairs, to roar her name, to confront, to weep, to demand an explanation. But the engineer, the calm, analytical, dispassionate problem solver, who had built bridges that withstood hurricanes and designed libraries that housed centuries of knowledge surfaced through the shock. This was not a family dispute. This was a catastrophic structural failure. The primary load-bearing beam of trust had been completely, utterly compromised, eaten through from the inside by termites of greed and deceit. An emotional response, stares, shouts, accusations would be like applying a bandage to a collapsing foundation. It would achieve nothing but a faster Messier ruin. I needed diagnostics. I needed schematics of their plan. I needed to understand the full extent of the damage, the materials they were using, the timeline of the demolition, before I could even begin to sketch a blueprint for reinforcement, let alone countermeasures. I heard the familiar creak of my own office chair, the one with the worn leather seat, footsteps. They were coming out. With a stealth I didn't know I still possessed. A relic perhaps of my youthful Navy days on silent watch, I retreated. Not a run, but a smooth, silent glide. Back through the laundry room, past the humming washer, out the side door into the stifling, breathless heat of the garage. I didn't get in my car. I simply stood in the semi-darkness, surrounded by the silent, dusty ghosts of my project's half-used cans of paint labeled with room names, Eleanor's old wicker gardening basket, Sophia's first bicycle with its rusted training wheels. I stood there until my breathing, which had come in shallow, ragged gasps that hurt my chest, evened out into something slow, deep, and deliberate. I stood there until the white-hot fury, the incandescent pain, cooled and hardened in my core into something new, a hard, cold, diamond-like core of absolute resolve. I looked at my watch an old Seiko Eleanor had given me. It was 4:07 p.m. They would expect me soon. The performance had to begin. The curtain was rising on the final act of their play, and I had just decided to rewrite the script. That evening's dinner was an Academy Award-worthy exercise in sustained, internal agony. The meatloaf Sophia's conscious attempt at a homely meal she knew I had always liked tasted like ash in my mouth. I pushed the peas around my plate with my fork, creating little trenches in the mashed potatoes. "Everything all right, Dad?" she asked, her brow furrowed in a perfect, convincing pantomime of concern. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cool, dry. The touch, once a comfort, now felt reptilian. "You seem a million miles away. Was the doctor okay?" "Nothing? Worrying?" I manufactured a weary, slightly confused smile, letting my shoulders slump a fraction, allowing a faint tremor to enter my hand beneath hers. I leaned into the caricature they had of me. "Just the usual, sweetheart. Dr. Evans says I'm boringly healthy. Just tired, I suppose. The heat, you know. It saps an old man's energy. Makes the mind wander." I consciously used the phrase old man, feeding the narrative. "Well, you need to conserve it," she chimed, her voice bright as she squeezed my hand before retracting hers to pick up her wine glass. "Big Thanksgiving next week. I've invited the Millers and the Costas. Maybe 12 people total. You're still up for hosting, right?" "It's tradition. It's what you always wanted." "Of course," I murmured, my voice softer, less assured than my normal, firm tone. I injected a note of wistful confusion. "Your mother, she loved a full house. The more noise, the better." I used the memory of Eleanor as both a shield and a probe. watching her face for a flicker of guilt, of remembrance. There was none. Just a placid, smiling mask, a slight nod of agreement. Leo watched me from the head of the table, where he had gradually assumed the position over the last year, his eyes like two dark, polished lenses, recording, assessing. "You sure you're feeling up to it, Arthur?" he asked, his voice dripping with a false, avuncular concern that made my skin crawl. "It's a lot of work, a big crowd. The noise, the chaos. We can always make a reservation somewhere nice. A restaurant. Take the pressure off you." "No, no," I waved a slightly trembling hand, adding to the act of fragile insistence. "The house. It should be full. It needs the life. It's what Eleanor would have wanted. She'd want the family together here." I saw the glance they exchanged then. Quick, silent, triumphant communication that passed between them in a microsecond. He's insisting. Sentimental and predictable, perfect, the stage is set. The rest of the meal was a torture chamber of mundane, hollow conversation. I excused myself early, pleading fatigue and a need to lie down, and retreated to my bedroom. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, the house whispering its familiar nighttime symphony of settling timber, expanding pipes, and the sigh of the air conditioning cycling off. I listened acutely to their muffled voices through the wall, to their laughter reel this time, unguarded, buoyant, and celebratory. I was the joke. I was the mark. The heist was in its final stages, and the thieves were toasting their imminent success in the next room. My real work, the work of salvation, began in the dead of night in the blue, silent hour just past 1 a.m. when the world holds its breath. Dressed in dark sweatpants and a black navy sweater from a lifetime ago, I moved through the house like a phantom, a ghost in my own domain. My target wasn't a locked safe or a hidden drawer. It was the large, wheeled blue recycling bin in the garage, and the matching black trash can. If they were this advanced, this confident in their planning, there would be drafts. There would be discarded copies, notes, printouts with coffee cup stains. Overconfident people, especially those who believe they are manipulating a fool, become careless. They leave traces. The bin was nearly full, a testament to a week of normal life masking monstrous intent. I pulled the heavy, knotted bag out onto the cold, concrete floor with minimal sound and began a methodical forensic search. Coffee grounds, yogurt containers, torn envelopes, junk mail catalogs, nothing. My heart, which had been a steady drum of resolve, began to sink into a cold pool of doubt. Had I misheard? Had my own mind, in a cruel twist, concocted this horror? Had they been that meticulous, that thorough? Then my fingers, probing beneath a stack of flattened cardboard boxes from their recent online shopping, touched not flexible plastic, but the crisp corner of paper. I carefully extracted a crumpled ball of high-quality bond paper, the kind used for legal documents. My pulse, which had slowed, now hammered against my ribs. I took the paper ball to my cluttered workbench under the harsh, unforgiving glow of the fluorescent shop light and, with infinite care, smoothed the pages flat, using a clean rag to press out the creases. The heading at the top of the first page was a sucker punch to the gut, driving the air from my lungs. In the Superior Court of Arizona, Maricopa County, case nitrogen monoxide, blank, petition for appointment of an emergency, guardian and conservator in re the matter of Arthur James Reed, alleged incapacitated person. The document was a masterpiece of legal horror, a Frankenstein's monster stitched together from half-truths, outright lies, and grotesque exaggerations. It cited specific, fabricated incidents with chilling detail. Me wandering onto the Jacobsons' property at 3 a.m. in my pajamas? Confused and disoriented, I had, in fact, gone out one morning at 6 a.m. to retrieve a newspaper the wind had blown into their rosemary bush. It described me making large, inexplicable wire transfers to suspicious overseas accounts, my quarterly, documented donations to an international wildlife charity Eleanor had loved and supported for decades. It claimed I had become verbally abusive and paranoid, accusing Sophia of stealing family heirlooms and poisoning my food the one time. Months ago, I'd casually asked where a particular silver picture Frame of Eleanor's mother had gone, and she'd breezily said she'd sent it out for professional polishing, a task I'd since forgotten to follow up on. Each tiny, innocent moment of normal life, every minor friction or forgotten detail, had been carefully harvested, twisted, amplified, and weaponized into a narrative of irreversible decline. The attached Psycho-Geriatric Assessment and Capacity Evaluation by Dr. Terence Aldridge, M.D., was 3 pages of damning, coldly clinical prose. It stated he had conducted a comprehensive 2-hour in-home evaluation of me just the previous week, a bald-faced, breathtaking lie. It described my flattened affect, my tangential and disorganized thought process, my severely impaired short and long-term memory, and my complete lack of insight into my cognitive deficits. It concluded with a chilling, definitive recommendation due to the subject's profound and progressive cognitive incapacity and his potential to incur catastrophic financial harm or physical danger to himself or others. I recommend the immediate appointment of a plenary, full guardian and conservator to assume control of his person and estate. But the most damning evidence, the proof of premeditated malice, was not the printed lies from a fictitious doctor. It was the handwritten notes in the margins in Sophia's unmistakable, precise, looping script, the same handwriting from her childhood. Thank you notes and school essays. Next to a paragraph detailing my alleged paranoid delusions, she had written, emphasize this in oral argument with the judge. Use the hiding money in books anecdote. Leo mentioned at the bottom of the asset schedule page, where my house, accounts, and investments were listed, she'd scribbled a timeline. File petition Monday, November 25th. Coordinate with Leo's attorney to freeze all accounts. Same day. Give nitrogen monoxide warning. Serve him at the dinner table. I sat on the cold, oil-stained garage floor. The pages spread before me like the blueprints of my own annihilation, my citizenship in the world of the sane and free being legally revoked. The initial soul-rending shock had passed. In its place, permeating every cell, was a crystalline, hyper-focused calm. This was the problem, laid bare in black and white. The dimensions, the materials, the stress points. Now the engineer had to design the solution. They had, in their arrogance, given me the ultimate gift, their precise timeline. I had 9 days. 9 days to render their entire, cruel, meticulously constructed architecture obsolete. The house was the cornerstone, the grand prize. My countermove, from an engineering standpoint, was obvious, elegant in its simplicity. Remove the cornerstone. Let their structure tumble into the void. Dawn was a thin, gray line on the eastern horizon when I finally gathered the papers and moved from the garage to my study. I ignored the bed, the mere thought of sleep a ludicrous fantasy, a luxury for the secure and the untroubled. I powered on my computer, the monitor's glow the only light in the room, and began a systematic digital inventory of my existence. I pulled every critical physical document from my fireproof safe, the deed with its gold seal, the title insurance policy, bank statements from 3 different institutions, brokerage statements, the original jointly signed will Eleanor and I had created with a reputable attorney 20 years prior, leaving the bulk of our estate to a land, conservation trust, and an engineering scholarship fund at our alma mater with a modest, protected trust for Sophia to be administered by a third party, will she had never seen, let alone known the contents of. I worked methodically, using a professional-grade scanner I'd bought for archiving old blueprints, creating high-resolution, searchable PDFs of every page. These files were not saved to my computer's hard drive, where a sophisticated search might find them. I uploaded them directly to a secure, encrypted, zero-knowledge cloud storage service I'd set up years prior for backing up my life's work, a service whose long, complex login credentials existed only in my memory and on a single, cipher-encoded sheet of paper stored in my bank safety deposit box. I then returned every original document to its precise location in the safe. Nothing, not a folder's angle, could appear disturbed. My next move required specialized, outside expertise, but I was operating in hostile territory. I couldn't risk a local referral, a friend's recommendation. Sophia had worked as a paralegal for a high-profile family law firm for years. Her professional network in the local, legal and financial, community was wide and deep. I needed a lawyer from outside the ecosystem, one with a specific, hardened skill set and a reputation for ruthless discretion. A few hours of careful, anonymized online research, using a public library computer, pointed me toward Rebecca Thorne, whose practice, in the neighboring county of Pinal, specialized explicitly in high-conflict asset protection and elder law litigation. Her website was stark, devoid of the usual smiling photos and platitudes. It was a simple list of practice areas and notable case results, phrases like successfully defeated fraudulent guardianship petition and obtained seven-figure judgment for financial exploitation of senior. It promised not comfort, but cold, effective defense. I called her office from a payphone at a nearly abandoned gas station on the old highway, a quaint anachronism that now felt like a vital tool of espionage. Her office was in a modest, unassuming professional building, not a gleaming downtown tower. She herself was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing and a manner that was both brisk and deeply, intently attentive. I laid out the documents. On her polished mahogany conference table, the scanned deed, the forged petition, the fraudulent psychiatric report. I did not embellish with emotion. I did not weep or rage. I stated the facts, as an engineer would report on a critically failing structure. To a review board, the identified flaw, breach of trust, the applied stresses, fraudulent documents, conspiracy, the calculated load, the value of the estate, and the predicted, imminent point of catastrophic collapse, November 25th. She read in utter, tomb-like silence for what felt like an eternity, her expression growing progressively grimmer, her lips pressing into a thin, bloodless line. Finally, she set the last page down with a soft, definitive tap and looked at me, not with pity, but with a fierce, professional respect. Mr. Reid, this is a textbook case of predatory filial exploitation, built on a foundation of document forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud. This medical affidavit is not just unethical. It is criminal. However, she leaned forward, steepling her fingers, her gaze locked on mine. The civil and criminal justice systems move with agonizing slowness when it comes to untangling fraud. Their petition, however fraudulent, is a loaded weapon pointed at the court's sense of urgency. A sympathetic probate judge, swayed by the compelling, tearful testimony of a seemingly devoted daughter and an authoritative, signed doctor's letter, might very well grant temporary emergency guardianship, ex parte, without you even being in the room. That temporary order, issued in the name of protecting you, would give them immediate legal control. It would freeze your assets, including the house, pending a full investigation. By the time we gathered evidence, filed motions, proved the forgery, and got to a hearing, the house could be sold under the conservator's authority. The money moved, dissipated, lost in Leo's debt vortex. The system, in its well-meaning but often clumsy desire to protect the vulnerable, can itself become the primary tool of the thief. So what's the solution? I asked, my voice flat, steady, matching her clinical tone. Preemption, she said, the word sharp, clean, and final as a guillotine blade. You must make their primary target vanish before they can legally lay claim to it. You are the sole, uncontested owner of your major illiquid asset. You sell it. You convert illiquid, attachable assets into liquid funds held in new, secure, anonymous accounts they know nothing about and cannot access. You exercise your full, unimpaired legal rights before they can get a court order to stop you. Once the house is gone, transferred to a bona fide third-party purchaser, their petition loses its most compelling, tangible financial motive. It becomes a messy, suspicious, and much less sympathetic fight over bank accounts and investments, and judges look far more skeptically at those battles. It shifts the narrative from saving Dad from himself to what exactly are you trying to get and why. Can a sale be completed in 9 days? Legally, definitively? It is an extreme, aggressive timeline, but not impossible with the right elements. a motivated seller, a cash buyer, and a willingness to pay a premium for speed and certainty, she said, pulling a legal pad toward her. You will need to price it attractively below market. You must be available for instant, often inconvenient showings. You must agree to a bare bones as-is contract, waiving most contingencies. You will, unequivocally, leave money on the table, a significant amount. You must not think of it as a financial loss. Think of it as a strategic withdrawal, a necessary cost incurred for your own liberation. The price of buying back your future. She picked up a sleek silver pen. I know a realtor. His name is Marcus. He has the social graces of a scalpel and operates entirely in a gray market of efficiency. He has a deep network of cash investors, LLCs, trusts, foreign entities who close deals in days, not months, with no financing contingencies. He is also, critically, a vault. Discretion is his only product. The machinery of my counter-offensive was now engaged, its gears meshing with a silent, irrevocable certainty. Marcus was exactly as advertised, a human blunt instrument encased in an impeccably tailored suit. He came to the house the next afternoon, while Sophia and Leo were at their respective offices. He did not admire the exposed beam ceilings. Eleanor had loved or comment on the custom bookshelves. He walked through in 20 silent, assessing minutes, asking no questions about memories or history, only technical, clinical ones, year of the roof, type of HVAC and last service, any foundation repairs, age of the major appliances. His demeanor was that of a coroner conducting an autopsy, not a guest in a home. Back in the minimalist living room, he stated his terms without preamble. Market analysis suggests $740. Price it at $695, and I'll have it under a solid cash contract in 48 hours. My buyer will waive inspection for the right number. They'll want a 10-day close, maximum. Do we have a deal? I looked around the room at the afternoon sunlight dappling the hardwood floor where Eleanor's baby grand piano once stood, where Sophia had taken her first wobbly steps. It was no longer my home. It was a liability, a trap, a piece of set dressing in their play. My attachment was a weakness they had counted on. I severed it. We have a deal, I said, and signed the exclusive listing agreement on the spot, my signature firm and clear. Returning to the house after that meeting, I entered the most, psychologically and emotionally, grueling phase of the entire ordeal, the sustained, high-stakes performance. I had to become Arthur Red, a man gently, unassumingly fraying at the edges. I forgot where I'd placed my reading glasses, asking Sophia to help me find them twice in one day. I asked her the same question about the grocery list for Thanksgiving, whether we needed more sage only, an hour after she'd answered it. I spent long, vacant-looking hours napping in my leather armchair, a book open but unread on my lap, while behind my closed eyelids, my mind was a humming command center, running scenarios, plotting logistics. 10. All the while, through secure channels with Rebecca, I built my financial fortress. I opened new checking, savings, and money market accounts at a large national bank where I had no prior history, using the hotel's address for initial correspondence. I initiated the careful, staggered transfer of my non-retirement brokerage funds into these new vessels. I changed every online password, not just for banks, but for email, utilities, cloud storage, everything. I set up two-factor authentication on every account that offered it. I purchased a second cheap, pay-as-you-go mobile phone, a burner phone, that lived hidden in the spare tire well of my car's trunk, a direct, secure line to Rebecca and Marcus. My personal phone remained, a prop in my performance. Simultaneously, I began constructing my legal defense with the precision of a watchmaker. I couldn't just claim competency. I needed to prove it with irrefutable, third-party evidence that would withstand the glare of a courtroom. Over the next week, I visited 3 different, highly respected board-certified geriatric psychiatrists in 3 different cities, paying out of pocket for comprehensive independent evaluations. I sat through hours of cognitive tests recalling word lists, drawing complex geometric shapes from memory, solving logic puzzles. I underwent lengthy clinical interviews about my life, my work, my current concerns. Each evaluation concluded with a virtually identical, notarized report. Mr. Reed demonstrates superior cognitive function and organizational ability for his age. No clinical evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, delirium, or any other significant cognitive impairment. He exhibits clear, logical, and strategic thinking and is fully capable of understanding and managing his personal, medical, and complex financial affairs. These documents were my shield, my suit of armor. I had 3 of them. My most audacious, psychologically complex move, however, was one of deliberate misdirection. I needed to feed their overconfidence, to make them believe their plan was proceeding perfectly. Using an old manual Royal typewriter I bought for cash at a dusty flea market, I spent an evening crafting a new, fake last will and testament. It was a crude, amateurish document, full of spelling errors, shaky legal phrasing, and emotional flourishes. I, Arthur J. Reed, being of sound mind and body, leave everything I own, my house and all my money in the bank, to my loving and caring daughter, Sophia Reed Chun, for her kindness and devotion to her old father. I signed it with a deliberately tremulous, wavering hand, smudged the ink slightly, and carefully coffee-stained, and slightly burned the edges of the paper to simulate age and haste. I then placed this document prominently in my bedroom safe. After secretly moving the genuine, attorney-drafted will to my new safety deposit box, I wanted them to find it. I needed their arrogance to reach its zenith, for them to believe the final piece had fallen into place, that I was indeed the sentimental fool they took me for, secretly planning to leave them everything. It was the bait and the trap. The days bled into one another, a tense countdown marked by quiet desperation and meticulous, invisible action. Marcus delivered as promised. Within 48 hours, a full-price cash offer arrived via email from a California-based investment LLC with a string of numbers for a name. $685,000, a 10-day close, with a signing set for November 26th at 10 a.m., the day before Thanksgiving. The cruel, poetic symmetry of it was not lost on me. I signed the mountain of disclosure, forms and purchase agreements in Marcus's sterile office, my hand steady, my mind focused on the equation. $685,000, now versus total loss later. The proceeds were to be wired to a title company's escrow account and then, upon recording, immediately forwarded to my new private bank account. The transaction was set in motion, a boulder rolling downhill, impossible to stop. The morning of November 25th, the day before the closing, Sophia was a whirlwind of faux holiday excitement and brittle energy. "Big day for final prep, Dad," she chirped, pulling on a light jacket. "I'm off to the specialty butcher for the fresh, free-range turkey and then the florist for the centerpiece. You sure you're okay holding down the fort? Don't overexert yourself." She floated over and kissed my forehead, a gesture that now felt like a Judas kiss, a brand of betrayal. "I'm just going to tidy up my study," I said, my voice purposely faint, distant. "Make some room. For the guests? Don't want anyone tripping over my old blueprints. Don't overdo it." She trilled, the picture of concerned daughterhood, before sailing out the front door, believing with all her heart that the final, triumphant act of her long-rehearsed play was about to begin. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, the performance ended and the operation commenced. I moved with a speed and efficiency that belied my 71 years. My pre-packed suitcase, one single, sturdy roller bag, and a single banker's box of truly irreplaceable items waited in the garage. Family photo albums predating Sophia's birth, Eleanor's modest jewelry box, my professional engineering awards, my father's old silver pocket watch. These I loaded into the trunk of my Volvo. In my now strangely empty feeling study, I sat at the heavy oak desk that had been my father's. I took out a sheet of my personal stationery, the thick linen paper engraved with my name and old business address. I wrote a single, flawless sentence in my clear, architectural lettering asterisk for Sophia, who was always looking for the important papers. Asterisk, I placed it in a plain, white business envelope, sealed it, and slipped it into the center drawer of the desk. Inside the envelope was a photocopy of the fully executed, notarized settlement statement from the sale of the house, clearly showing the close of escrow scheduled for 10 a.m. the following day, November 26th. I took one final silent walk through the empty rooms. I touched the cold granite of the kitchen counter where Eleanor had rolled out countless pie crusts. I stood in the doorway of the sunlit room that had been Sophia's nursery, then her childhood sanctuary, now a sterile guest room. I felt the grief then, a vast, hollowing wave, not for the loss of the physical structure, but for the loss of the story, the beautiful, enduring family narrative I had believed we were living inside. Then, with a force of will, I drew from a deep, untapped well. I shut the door on it, both literally and figuratively. I got into my car and drove, not with panic, but with purpose, to a mid-tier, extended-stay hotel in a commercial, anonymous part of Phoenix I never frequented. I checked in under my own name. There was no point in hiding my location. I wanted a clear, digital and credit card footprint showing a rational, autonomous man conducting legitimate business, a man planning for a future. Thanksgiving Day, my hotel room was silent, sterile, smelling of antiseptic cleaner and air conditioning. The view was a panoramic study of urban banality, a vast parking lot, a busy freeway overpass, the backs of big-box stores. At precisely 1:17 p.m., my personal phone, the one they knew, rang on the bland nightstand. The caller ID flashed Sophia home. I let it ring 3 times, steadying my breath, then answered. "Dad, where are you?" Her voice was a tight coil of strained irritation, stretched over a perilously thin layer of saccharine-sweet concern. "The turkey's resting. The Millers are here with their awful, jellied cranberry sauce. Everyone's asking for the guest of honor." "You're stealing your own spotlight. I won't be joining you today." "Sophia," I said, my voice calm, neutral, placid, the same voice I had used for decades when explaining a complex load diagram or a construction delay to a concerned client. A stunned electric silence crackled down the line. "What? Don't be silly. Are you lost? Did you get confused driving? Tell me exactly where you are right now. Leo will jump in the car and come get you." "It's no trouble." "I'm not lost," I repeated, my tone even, immutable. "I'm exactly where I intend to be. But since you're at the house, perhaps you should check the center drawer of my desk in the study. There's something there for you. I think you'll find it clarifying." "Dad, this isn't funny." The sweetness was evaporating rapidly, leaving behind a hard metallic edge of fear and dawning fury. "Just look, Sophia." I ended the call, powered off the phone, and set it down. The silence in the room was absolute. I could envision the scene in the house with a painful, crystalline clarity. The bustling, warm kitchen filled with the smell of roasted bird and pie. The clink of wine glasses, the murmur of confused guests asking polite questions. Her face a mask of frustration as she excused herself. The sharp, angry click of her heels on the hardwood floor I'd installed. The squeal of the desk drawer rolling open. The rip of the envelope. Then a silence so profound, so total, that I could feel it vibrating through 50 miles of empty desert air. It stretched, that silence. I watched the clock on the hotel wall. It lasted 1 minute and 47 seconds. An eternity of collapsed reality. Then my phone, now powered back on, erupted into a convulsive, screaming vibration. Her voice, when I answered, was a raw, shattered thing, stripped of all pretense, all control, all civility. "What is this?" she shrieked, the sound tearing at her vocal cords. Is you D1? A settlement statement? What did you do, you senile old fool? Who did this to you?" "I sold the house, Sophia," I said, my voice remaining a flat, calm plane. "The closing is tomorrow morning at 10, but the contract is binding. It is no longer my house. It therefore cannot be yours. The new owners take possession next week." The phone was fumbled, dropped. I heard a crash, perhaps a glass hitting the floor. Then Leo's voice, roaring, filled with incoherent, sputtering fury, came on the line. "Arthur! You listen to me, you old bastard. You have been manipulated. Preyed upon? That realtor, that shark, he saw a confused old man and he took you for a ride. This sale is fraudulent. Undue influence. We are calling our lawyer right now and getting an emergency injunction. This will not stand. You are not in your right mind. I have independent, notarized psychiatric evaluations from 3 separate, board-certified practitioners, all conducted within the last 10 days, stating unequivocally that I am in full possession of my mental faculties and capable of complex financial decision-making, I recited, as if reading from a technical report. I also have digital audio recordings made lawfully in my own home of you and Sophia over the past week, conspiring to file a fraudulent guardianship petition, forging a medical affidavit, and seizing my assets. The conversations are quite detailed. They include your plans to liquidate the house to pay off your business debts. Would you like me to play the excerpt from November 17th, or the more recent one from 2 nights ago, where you discussed the timing of the asset freeze? The silence that followed this statement was of an entirely different quality than the first. It was not the silence of shock, but the silence of a vacuum, of a universe imploding, of a meticulously constructed house of cards, disintegrating into absolute nothingness. It was the sound of power dynamics reversing irrevocably. It was, I realized, the most powerful and satisfying sound I had ever heard. You recorded us? Leo's voice was now a strangled, defeated whisper, all bluster gone. Arizona is a one-party consent state, I said, the legal phrase rolling off my tongue with ease. My house. My conversations? My consent. I suggest you find a way to explain to the Millers. And the cost is why Thanksgiving is effectively canceled. You'll need to vacate the premises for the new owners by the end of next week, I ended the call. This time, I removed the battery from the phone. I sat in the beautiful, terrible, earned quiet of the hotel room, the freeway noise a distant river of sound. The first and most critical battle was over. I had seized the high ground. I had taken their queen. But the war, as Rebecca Thorne had soberly warned me, was only beginning. True to their nature and backed into a corner, they fought with the desperate, vicious energy of the truly doomed. Their lawyer, a slick, aggressive litigator named Marcus Webb, who advertised on late-night TV, filed the emergency guardianship petition first thing Monday morning, just as they'd always planned, but now with a new, frantic spin. It was a masterpiece of manipulative, oily prose, painting me as a vulnerable, confused elder being ruthlessly exploited by a predatory, out-of-state cash buyer, with my daughter portrayed as a heartbroken, heroic figure trying desperately to save her beloved father from a catastrophic, financially ruinous mistake. Our response, delivered by Rebecca with the force of a tactical missile strike, was devastating in its simplicity and proof. We submitted my 3 pristine psychiatric evaluations. We submitted a detailed day-by-day timeline, meticulously correlating their secretly recorded conversations we provided, professionally transcribed excerpts. We held back the actual audio files as a courtroom trump card, with their legal maneuvers and financial preparations. We submitted the full, unbroken chain of documentation for the house sale, demonstrating it was a rational, preemptive, and legally flawless act of asset protection undertaken with full competency and advice of counsel. The emergency hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. The judge, an older man with the weary, all eyes of a long-time probate jurist, listened to Sophia's 5-minute, tearful testimony, then spent 10 minutes silently reviewing our filing. The court is presented with a direct, irreconcilable contradiction, he intoned, his voice dry and rustling like old parchment. On one hand, the sworn, emotional concern of a daughter. On the other, substantial, contemporaneous, and unrebutted medical evidence of testamentary and contractual capacity, coupled with evidence of premeditated planning by the petitioner regarding the very assets in question. The sale of the home, while certainly a drastic measure, appears on this record to be a legal and unilateral exercise of the respondent's property rights. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied. This Matter may be set for a full evidentiary hearing, but no temporary orders are granted. Denied, it was a critical, monumental victory, but it was a defensive one. Rebecca and I now shifted from a defensive crouch to a relentless, rolling offensive designed not just to stop them, but to dismantle their lives as they had tried to dismantle mine. We filed a civil lawsuit. Arthur Reed versus Sophia Reed Chun and Leo Chun. The causes of action were stark and brutal: civil conspiracy fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and unjust enrichment. We sued for 2 years of fair market rent for their residence in my home, calculated at $3,500 per month, a total of $84,000. We sued for punitive damages of $250,000 for the egregious, malicious nature of the scheme. Simultaneously, we formally submitted all evidence of the forged Dr. Aldridge affidavit to the State Medical Board and the County District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation of forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud. The civil discovery process was a siege weapon of unparalleled destructive power. They were legally compelled to open their financial records, every bank statement, every credit card bill, every loan document. Leo's failing tech consultancy, its debt a tangled, ugly mess of personal guarantees, high-interest merchant cash advances, and unpaid taxes, was laid bare for the court. Their personal credit card statements, showing lavish spending on vacations, electronics, and restaurants even as they lived rent-free with me, were exposed. Depositions were a special kind of agony. Watching Sophia, under the relentless, precise, unyielding questioning of Rebecca Thorne, squirm in the witness chair, forced to admit to the handwritten notes on the petition, to explain the nature of her care, to justify the discussions of asset seizure, was a hollow, profoundly sad spectacle. The woman I saw was not my daughter, but a stranger, small, cornered, and venomous. The financial and reputational pressure was intolerable for them. Sophia was let go from her paralegal position. The scandal and the lawsuit were too much for the image-conscious firm. Leo's few remaining clients, sniffing trouble, fled. The civil case was a financial millstone around their necks, generating impossible legal bills. The criminal referral from the Diaz office, a looming shadow of possible felony charges, hung over them like the sword of Damocles. The final, definitive, unanswerable blow was the court-ordered independent neuropsychological evaluation. The expert, Dr. Lillian Vargas, chosen by the court from an agreed-upon list, spent an entire day with me at a neutral clinic. We didn't discuss my health or my feelings. We discussed fluid dynamics and the engineering challenges of the Three Gorges Dam. We analyzed the structural flaws in the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse. I walked her through my investment portfolio's asset allocation, strategy, and the tax implications of the house sale. Her report, submitted to the court, left not a shred of room for argument or interpretation. Mr. Reed functions cognitively at a very high level, exceeding normative data for his age and education. His decision-making process regarding the sale of his home was logical, sequential, strategic, and based on a clear, perceived threat to his autonomy. There is no neuropsychological evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, or any other cognitive disorder that would impair his judgment, reasoning, or capacity to manage his person or estate. Facing this mountain of evidence, their legal position crumbled into dust. On the eve of the civil trial, their lawyer, Marcus Webb, approached Rebecca with a settlement offer. They would drop all claims to any of my assets and vacate the house immediately if I would drop the lawsuit and the criminal referral. Rebecca conveyed the offer to me in her office, a single raised eyebrow conveying her opinion. They have nothing. This is a surrender. They are bankrupt in every sense. Taking the deal ends it cleanly. I looked out her window at the city. No, I said, my voice quiet but absolute. I don't want it to end cleanly for them. I want the judgment. I want the public record. I want a piece of paper signed by a judge that states what they did. I want it to follow them forever. The trial was a brief, formal, almost anticlimactic affair. The judgment was entered in my favor, $184,000 in back rent, plus $100,000 in damages for the intentional infliction of emotional distress. Total, $184,000. The judge also included a formal, scathing finding of fact. The court finds the defendants engaged in a deliberate, malicious, and premeditated scheme to exploit the plaintiff through fraud and the abuse of the guardianship process. It was a line that would be etched into their credit reports, their background checks, their professional histories. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy within a month. The $184,000 judgment, like most of their unsecured debts, was discharged. I would never see a penny of that money. That was never the point. The point was the line in the public record. The point was the scorched earth. The point was the total, unequivocal victory in the eyes of the law. The aftermath was a slow, quiet, grim unraveling I observed from a great and peaceful distance. The bankruptcy trustee liquidated what little they had left, their newer cars, some electronics, Leo's worthless business equipment. Their marriage, a partnership founded entirely on shared avarice and selfishness, did not survive the financial ruin, the mutual blame, and the utter destruction of their reputations. They divorced within the year, a bitter, cheap affair in a crowded courtroom. Leo moved back to his home state to live with a resentful sibling, a broken, middle-aged man with nothing. Sophia, her name now toxic in any local professional circle, moved to a small, dusty city 2 hours away and took a clerical data entry job, a steep and humiliating fall from her former life. The district attorney, while overburdened, did pursue the forgery case. The phantom Dr. Aldridge was traced to a shady online medical documentation service, leading to a separate investigation that entangled Sophia in further legal depositions and headaches, though criminal charges against her personally were ultimately deferred. The stain, however, was permanent. As for me, I used a portion of the proceeds from the house sale to buy a modern, secure, low-maintenance condominium in an active adult community in Sedona, surrounded by the breathtaking Red Rock Cathedral spires of the desert. It has stunning, ever-changing views, a robust, vigilant residents association, and no guest room. My neighbors are fellow retirees, artists, wanderers, and quiet souls. Our relationships are based on shared interests in geology, hiking, books, and woodworking, not on genetic obligation, assumed duty, or the poisonous dynamics of family expectation. The silence here is not the heavy, waiting silence of an empty house filled with ghosts. It is the deep, expansive silence of peace, hard-earned, fiercely protected, and deeply appreciated. About 18 months after the judgment was entered, a letter forwarded by Rebecca Thorne's office arrived in my new mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was Sophia's, but sloppy, rushed, the pen digging into the paper. It was a torrent of blame, self-pity, and revisionist history for her poverty, her loneliness, her ruined life, her failed marriage. I had chosen money over family. I had destroyed my only child. I was a cold, vindictive old man. The final paragraph contained a request, not for a reconciliation or forgiveness, but for a loan, a bridge to get back on my feet. I read it once, carefully under the bright light of my kitchen. I felt a distant, abstract pang not of parental love, but of a profound, existential sadness for the person she had chosen to become, for the bright, curious little girl she had buried so completely beneath layers of avarice, entitlement, and malice. Then, without ceremony or lingering emotion, I fed the pages through a cross-cut shredder I kept for documents. The mechanical whir and the soft rain of paper confetti into the wastebasket were the final, satisfying punctuation mark on the story. They had come at me with the most potent weapons they could muster, the bonds of family, the performance of love, the corruption of the legal and medical systems. They had seen an old man, a lonely structure, and thought me an easy demolition, a soft target. But they forgot what I was at my core, an engineer. An engineer understands pressure, load, stress, and counterforce. An engineer knows that to save the essential integrity of a structure, you must sometimes deliberately, surgically remove the compromised element, no matter how central it once seemed. I simply removed the element they thought was their prize, the house, the symbol of my life, and then stood back, protected by my new foundations, and watched as the faulty, rotten architecture of their own lives, built on a foundation of deceit and greed, collapsed under its own unsustainable weight. My story is not one of glorious vengeance or fiery triumph. It is a story of quiet, meticulous, exhausting self-defense. It is a blueprint for resilience in the face of unthinkable betrayal. It proves that even when the attack comes from within your own walls, from the people you were meant to trust most, you can still rebuild. You can still pour a new foundation, one mixed with the hard lessons of loss and the cold strength of truth. You can still choose to stand, not on the haunting ruins of what was taken from you, but on the new, solid, unchallengeable ground you build for yourself alone. If this story of quiet strength, strategic resilience, and the reclamation of self has resonated with you, if you believe in the fundamental, non-negotiable right to protect your peace, your legacy, and your own sovereign mind, then I ask for your support. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement is the signal that stories of profound human truth, of difficult choices and hard-won victories, deserve to be told, heard, and remembered. Let me know in the comments below, what is the first, single, practical step you believe you would take if you ever found yourself in a similar, unthinkable situation? Your perspective, your insight, adds to our collective understanding of human nature. Thank you for listening.